Do you think free pig feed is saving you money? You may want to think again. Poor nutrition and hidden cost could be eating away at your profits and creating a subpar product. I'm Rod from Dottle Family Farms, and I've been raising pasture pigs now for nearly 7 years. And today I'll help you evaluate the nutritional value of alternative feed options and save you money while increasing the quality of your pork. For most pastured pork producers, feed costs are the single greatest direct expense that we have, depending on the sizes of our operations and overhead. Reducing these costs can save a lot of money, so a lot of producers turn to free alternative feeds. But many of these feeds aren't free and cost more money to feed. In this video, we'll take a look at some of these feeds, from expired dairy and baker products to hardwood mass like acorns and hickory nuts, and crops that we can grow ourselves. But before we discuss these different feeds, we need to explore some basic principles of swine nutrition to help get us a little bit of context. Now, most people consider the protein content of the feed that they give their pigs usually around 16%. Depending on the stage of the pig's growth, that may vary a little bit from 18 down to 14 or even 12%. But just as importantly as the protein content is the amino acid profile of that protein. Simply put, proteins are made of essential amino acids, and each amino acid plays different roles. For pigs, the most common limiting amino acid is lysine, which is responsible for muscle growth and development. If you have 20 to 25% protein, but the lysine levels are not right, you won't get the growth from your pigs that you would be expecting. You see, part of the reason pigs need so much lysine is that they grow rapidly compared to cows or other large animals. Additionally, they are omnivores who naturally eat both plants and animals. And in the United States and most countries, we tend to feed our pigs on vegetarian diets for disease prevention and growing them at scale. Unfortunately, most of the lysine-focused feed sources are animal-based: meat, eggs, and dairy. Most plant-based feeds do not contain the lysine levels at rates to support pig growth at ideal rates. Now let me pause for a moment, acknowledging that I'm not a master in swine nutrition, but I have investigated a lot and worked with a couple different swine nutritionists generally to help make sure that I'm getting the right nutrition for my pigs to reduce their grain consumption and to help keep them healthy while grazing them on pasture. There are two different ways to think of the amount of lysine that pigs need. First, they need about 20 grams of lysine to put on 1 kilogram of weight. Now, the metric system helps a little bit in some of these calculations that follow. But if we're expecting to get a feed conversion ratio of about 3 kilograms of feed to 1 kilogram of weight gain, that's pretty normal. That means that we need 3 kilograms of feed to produce 1 kilogram of weight on the pig. Of that 3 kilograms of feed, 20 grams of it must be lysine. So the percentage of protein that would need to be lysine would need to be about 4.17%. I may be off on that a little bit, but it's pretty close. Now let's think about this a different way. When I can find the amino acid profile of forages, usually the lysine is measured as a percentage of the protein. Sometimes you'll see it related as grams of lysine per 16 grams of nitrogen. Is basically equivalent to 5% lysine as a percentage of protein. But because we're using a math equation, we need to consider the whole equation. Now let's take a look at some data. I'm pulling this data off feedopedia.org, a phenomenal resource. But red clover is 19.7% protein. The lysine is a low percentage at only 3.8% of the protein. Let's take a couple examples looking at data from feedopedia.org about red clover and buckwheat. Red clover is high in protein at 19.7%. The lysine is pretty low at only 3.8% protein. But let's do the math. How much lysine is in 3,000 grams or 3 kilograms of this feed? So there's 591 grams of protein in 3 kilograms of clover and 22.46 grams of lysine. Enough for the pigs to grow and put on a pound of weight. But notice that the protein level is higher. If we take a look at buckwheat forage, the plant, not the seed, it's 14.1% protein. That's 423 grams of protein, but because the lysine in buckwheat forage is high at 5.8% of the protein, then we have 24.5 grams of lysine in 3 kilograms of buckwheat forage. So even though the protein level is lower, it has more lysine than red clover. Now, there's one more distinction that we need to make. We can't just look and grow 3 kilograms of red clover and 3 kilograms of buckwheat because these measurements are given as a percentage of dry matter. Red clover is roughly 19.1% 1% dry matter and 81% water, with buckwheat being 15.9% dry matter and 84% water. So to get 3 kilograms of dry feed, you need 15.7 kilograms of red clover and 18.8 kilograms of wet buckwheat to account for the water weight. So this gives us a bit of a foundation for interpreting the feed value of different products that we're giving. Now let's take a look at some real-life examples. Pumpkins, for example. I'm often asked if pumpkins are great feed for livestock, and they are. But they may not be worth the money. Suppose someone has 10,000 pounds of pumpkins, and it's going to cost you $100 to get them. At first it sounds great. After all, a ton of feed cost me about $400. So let's do the math. Fresh pumpkin fruits, according to Feedopedia, are 7.6% dry matter. So if we take the 10,000 pounds and take the water out, we have 760 pounds equivalent of dry matter. That's the equivalent of $152 in feed. Now the protein content of that is about 14.5%, so it's close. But we don't know the lysine levels or anything else. But that does give us an idea of the relative feed value of those pumpkins. Just remember that it's not a nutritionally balanced feed. So is it worth carrying 9,240 pounds in extra water weight to save $52? Let's take a look at some other common feeds that are often fed. This is cursory information that I've looked up. I've never looked deeper into it because I don't have these options. But spent brewer's grains are often available for free. Dry matter content is usually 20 to 30%, so they're very wet. Protein is usually high at 23 to 29%. However, the lysine content is less than 1.4%. To get 3 kilograms of feed, you got to feed over 18 kilograms of dry grain. Most of the energy has been brewed out of those brewer grains. The lysine content is incredibly low, so that with 18 kilograms of feed, that's 40 pounds of dry feed, they still don't get all the nutrients they need. Now, acorns, for example, are roughly 5 to 8% protein, but they mostly have a bug in them in my area that increases the protein levels a little bit. The lysine levels are at 2.8% of an already low percentage of protein. So that's why pigs are often finished on acorns when the protein levels are lower. Now hickory nuts, beech nuts, both see an improvement, but not so much as you might think. Now dairy has a high percentage of lysine and a high percentage of protein. Remember that it's only 8 to 12% dry matter though. So you still have a lot of water that needs to be processed out of it for the pigs to consume it. You can calculate your feed cost to get dairy, but I'd suggest that you're giving it to smaller pigs. It's much more effective. Now you can find the information from expired breads and many other feeds. Some of them are really heavy to haul because of the water weight, but the main thing that I'll say about many of them is bread can negatively impact the quality of the fat on pigs, and I don't like it. Also, fish meal and other things can present off flavors in the meat of the animals. So the most effective way I've found to supplement our feed cost is by growing our own feed for our pigs. You can see the pigs out here behind me. The most nutritious crops that I've found are buckwheat, clovers, alfalfa, although we can't grow much alfalfa, cowpeas, winter peas, mung beans, hairy vetch, chicory, curly dock, Boston plantain, cereal rye, and some others. The beautiful thing about growing our own livestock feed for our pigs in these cover crops is that they perform well on them if we calculate the right percentages of cover crop mixes. Also, there's more water in them, so we don't have to use quite as much water to water our pigs. I've noticed that as well. Even though our pigs are fed on pasture, so from the time they're born, they have access to pasture all around. However, younger pigs have a more difficult time assimilating the nutrients from the pasture forages because their digestive tracts are so small. So I've found that if we wait until about 70 to 80 to 100 to 125 pounds, the pigs begin performing much, much better on pasture because their digestive tracts, particularly the cecum, is large enough to help them process more of those fiber-rich feeds. Now, so far, the main thing I've focused on is lysine because it is by far the most limiting amino acid for pigs on pasture. But what I've found in general is that if I grow a lot of different high-protein forages, particularly those that are high in lysine, like buckwheat, even though it's not high in protein, the other amino acids are often in balance. The real key is diversity. You can save yourself a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of energy supplementing your pigs with nutritious feeds. However, you can spend a lot of energy getting free feeds that aren't really free and aren't really helping you out in the long run. For example, do you really want to haul 10,000 pounds of pumpkins for 700 pounds of feed to save $52? It may not be worth the hassle, especially when you have to carry those pumpkins and tote them around and throw them to the pigs as well. I hope this video is helpful for you. If you got some value out of it, it'd do me a huge favor if you'd share it with anyone you think may get some value out of it as well. It'll help spread the message to help people raise their pigs better on pasture. Take care and have a great day.